This week, I got working on my fourth piece of art since my panic attack. With what seems like a deeper understanding about myself, I learned a lesson in the act of self-compassion and tending to the fire inside us. But as lessons go, this was one shaped by a mistake. There was already a lot of tension I was holding before I even got working on the sketch. It's the type of tension I was already familiar with. What if I can't draw anymore? What if it simply sucks and everyone sees what a fraud I am? What if I make a bad painting and it's too bad to show on camera? This is nothing new. I feel this every time before I make new work. The first thing I always try to do when approaching a blank canvas or paper these days is to let myself go completely. I allow myself to make a mess. I allow myself to be messy. My inner artist likes this because she's been waiting to let loose for a while. Attaching my identity throughout my life to external achievements, art making is my form of radical action. And I try to never forget that the reason why I came into the arts, to commit myself to exploring paintings and see where it takes me, wouldn't have happened if I carried the same kind of responsibility and restriction. I find the first few hours of creating to be like speaking to my therapist. She's still a stranger to me, and yet she invites me to share my deepest, even most shameful things about myself. Through the process, I realize I am deeply human. I am messy. And in my therapy session, I'm allowed to be messy. All parts of me feel accepted. It's amazing to me that when emotions get spoken out loud to another person and all parts of me be received equally, how weird it is that we ever try to hide in the first place. I can't make art I like if I don't allow myself to bring all of me into the creative process. If I am already editing and tightening up, it feels like I am conforming. Just like my relationship with the darkness, I like to believe that there is elegance in the mess. Just like in the dark of the night, there is a singular bright and round full moon. If we ignore the messy parts of ourselves, we would never create our own kind of elegance. In this particular painting, I was already keen on experimenting and pushing myself with some new techniques. After the first stage of mark making and sketching, I looked at this new thing that was unfolding before me, reviewing where to push the limits of my skill, where to let go, where to experiment. And between furrowed brows of concentration, I heard a tiny voice inside me, almost as if the woman in the sketch was speaking to me. And she was saying, "Let me be for a while." And that was when I got out of my own head and truly saw her for the first time. In a state distant from my own, dancing in her own world, creating with joy, completely immersed. She looks like she doesn't really care for anything else but tending to the fire inside her. I've always been curious about my relationship with the darker and lighter parts of myself. The parts that are shaped by my own upbringing and traumatic situations, and also the parts that are shaped by my light, the carefree person who can just be happy and live with simple pleasures and laugh with people. I've always been curious how out of these both sides, there is energy inside that always brings me back to creating things. And not only creating, but having a go, going on adventures, learning new things, having interesting conversations, trying different cuisines. This part of me seems so alive and so willing to shape and be shaped by the world. This energetic fire, I believe, is something we all hold inside us. If I am human, you are too. And we all exist in this human body in the same way. Different stories and different responses, but still the same physiology that can be so easily shaped. This agency we hold and this side of us that can be so easily affected by even the smallest thing is such a curious thing for me. I've always wanted to have a sustained form of relationship with my own inner fire. Staring at the woman dancing so elegantly in front of me, I started realizing the story she is meant to tell. I realized there and there that the fire within us can exist, independent of our traumas and our past, independent of the less than stories we tell ourselves or the expectations of who we should be. This fire is always there and it waits for us to engage. But to do that means to forego the expectation of a perfect starting point. We don't need the perfect place to write or make music or art. We don't need to be a planning tyrant who appears to know what they are doing. We don't need to be that one person who seeks to have everything figured out. I think this fire welcomes us even from our place of feeling lost, angry, hurt, or simply tired, or even happy and energetic and chaotic and restless. In fact, I think this inner energetic fire that allows us to fully engage in this world encourages us to come to her wherever we are. The most daunting task is to answer its call. After hearing this internal conversation between me and my painting to be, I decided to leave her be for a while. The next day, I wrote this writing that you're either reading or hearing. I tended to my chores, then I headed off to a few days of traveling with my partner. I would see her again next Monday, and maybe, I thought, I would be able to welcome her in, accepting my own feeling of lostness this time. Fire, when we don't fully feel at our best, can feel scary. She's full of life and emotions. She's full of expression that what is little in us might feel it's too much to handle. It's really my first year delving into commitment to my art practice wholeheartedly. I've traveled through many states of being completely sure of myself and unsure at the same time. I never realized the full commitment I was making to art, nor the fact that I would be in relationship with this fire when I jumped. Unbeknownst to me, it would involve more lostness and unknowns. Most weeks, I gain and lose a sense of direction at the same time. And this is not only evident of a life in the arts, but also in the act of creating. I now have a lot of respect for others, especially for the part of me that is drawn to creating. The microcosmic world of creating a painting is to start something, not knowing how it's going to turn out, and facing many facets of emotions that I might have long forgotten, especially playfulness. As adults, we are not taught to play without direction. Every time I create, I feel like I am undoing my very nature. The boxes and places I've gotten to know inside me for many years constantly want to pull me back in. And making art is my one rebellious act against the rules we all have been taught is either right or wrong. This fire asks us to honor emergence, not control. And a flame that burns steadily is better than a blazing fire that engulfs you and comes as quickly as it leaves. This may sound strange, but after I sketched and made marks on the new painting, looking at the woman, I feel like I've met her before. Before I got to painting with acrylics and oils, I reveled in the beauty of tension she holds. I added 2 flowers as last-minute additions because after drawing her entire body, I felt like something was missing. And for me, these 2 flowers that appear inside the drapes of her dress symbolize the tension of opposing energies that we hold inside us. And I think if we are humans seeking for a fuller understanding of life, we are always asked to hold this tension, to go beyond the edges of what we have lived with our entire lives so that we can have a fuller experience with ourselves, with the world, and with other people. To do that means it's full of inner and outer challenges. A relationship with fire, whether it's a steady flame or a blazing beast, doesn't come without any casualties. But I do feel like I'm constantly being called to see myself more fully when I come into this relationship. Maybe I don't have it all figured out, and that's okay. Maybe I don't need to appear to be the person who knows and can do everything. Maybe, finally, I can fully say, I am lost, I am scared, I am utterly afraid. I am inconsolably grieving for a past that is slowly fading in my memory. And still, even with what appears to be things we label as faults and flaws in our society, this fire still welcomes. She is, after all, someone who can hold a lot of polarities and potential. Our inner fire might just be bigger than we are. And in this essence of fire, after I was done with this painting, I felt both alive and spent. So much so that when I finished, I heard an Afrobeat song came on my Spotify playlist and I felt the need to dance, so I did. I stretched my skills and my imagination with this piece because I really wanted to bring through the feeling of movement, yet I wanted to show a kind of elegance that I think is present when we face inner tensions. That these inner tensions are not something to shame or to ignore, but to be seen and lean into. It's particles colliding to birth something new in this world that can only be created by holding seemingly opposite energies. I can think of one situation that is often hard for me to hold this type of tension. When I'm hurt, I find it hard to forgive. But lately, time is teaching me to not ignore my hurt, but also find the space in myself to forgive. Stretching myself in this way is most challenging personally. And it's easy to limit our imagination and thinking. It's easy to give names so easily to what we feel and who we think we are and what we can do. I danced, perhaps because my body stretched, as I danced with the tensions of testing my technical skills, alongside honoring the emergence of my imagination. And my body wanted to celebrate, but my poor mind, however, was frazzled. It had no language to describe what the heck just happened. What is this? What should I call this? How can this be possible? This feels wrong. It must be wrong. We must have done something wrong, it would say. My body, however, if it could speak, was probably saying, "Yes, Win, you did it. You allowed me to expand and I feel so alive." And if we can find the space in ourselves to accept us, wherever we are, in small and large moments, it may just be the door to new possibilities, and for our own sense of well-being and fulfillment. So I just finished the painting, and it feels really good to reach this stage because for the past few days now, I've been working with a lot of unknowns that often is a thing when you're like trying to create something from nothing. And I always try to approach my paintings from a sense of mystery, meaning I don't want to have everything too planned out. Even the sources that I create are only a guidance, and I use a lot more of my imagination to carry me through each stage. So because of that, I feel like the process is a constant conversation between me and the painting. And this painting is, I feel like, the first time where I not only have, done a painting from my own source and based on my own ideas, which means a lot to me because in the past 9 months, what I was doing was taking oil and drawing classes. So I was learning, and a lot of the lessons that we were doing was to draw from the sources that were given to us. But now that we have a lot more freedom, it creates more of a mystery, but also this sense of magical feelings is the best way I can put it, because I'm able to sort of paint things that are inside me that I've been wanting to paint for a long time, and that feels amazing. But I always feel like I have the tendency to overwork my paintings, but this is the first time where I feel like I've kept things loose but also tight. So there are areas of the painting where you've got like the detail of the dresses and some detail in the flowers that I feel like it's like almost like the focal point, and the way like the dress is swishing is almost like a statement piece of the painting. But then in the background there are these like mark makings that I've kept from the first ever layer. When I was doing the sketches, I kept these mark making bits, and those are still showing up, and that still makes it feel loose and more abstract. So I was working on it yesterday, and I was looking at this painting because one thing that I also have a tendency to do is just to like go crazy on the canvas, which is a great way to start off every painting. And I always try to come from that place of like complete immersion in just like trying to express myself as much as possible without any boundaries, that sort of vibe. But I always wanted to experiment with like giving my paintings a bit more space, meaning areas where it's a little bit like toned down and pushed back, and where it's a little bit more empty, so that the painting has a space to like breathe by itself. So I experimented with that, and yesterday I finished this layer of putting these like the moon, and also some of this like resting space of like more of like these very simple shades in the background. And I kept looking at it thinking, gosh, like something's missing. Something's really missing. I don't know what it is. And I took a picture of it, and then I just let the painting be for the rest of the night because it was pretty intense painting session. And then I came back to it later that night, and I looked at the picture I took, and all of a sudden I realized the moon needs a crescent moon. And where there is more of these like spaces, resting spaces of like blank shades that I've put, those need more scribbles. So that gave me like so much courage to start today. And the last edition of that crescent moon feels a lot like me. The moon and the motif of the moon means a lot to me. I feel very connected also with the moon, and I think a lot of artists have this feeling, and I definitely do. I feel like I get a lot of insights and messages during the full moon, and I also really like the calmness and this like fullness that it provides. So all of my paintings I've done so far has never gone without a moon in some way, shape or form, whether it's a circular shape, now it's a crescent shape. It's never really had anything that's outside of having a moon. And I think that motif is going to be there pretty much in all of my paintings for the foreseeable future. And it's nice that I find something that I can put a little bit of my stamp on to things. So yeah, I would say that this painting is one where I have technically pushed myself, but also have given myself enough space, enough freedom to express. And that means a lot. Like, me this time last year, or even in the beginning of 2025, if someone would have told me that I would reach this stage, I would have had a lot more calmness and less anxiety. But I guess it just goes to show to trust the process. Like, all the questions that we have in our minds and in our hearts eventually gets answered. But what needs to happen is for us to walk the journey. And from what I've experienced so far, the journey is never straightforward. It's up, then it's down, it's up, and then it's down. But in every little step of the way, I feel like these questions that I've always held in my heart gets answered little by little. And for me, being able to create a painting full of texture, full of symbolism, and full of beauty, full of color and vibrancy, and also full of contemplation and introspectiveness, is something that I've always wanted to do from the first time I started painting on canvas. And now to reach this part where it feels like there is a sense of things starting to materialize in front of me feels amazing. And that's not to say that the next painting that I do is not going to feel really nerve-wracking. And that's not to say that I'm not going to get nervous or whatever. But I feel like by now I'm getting more and more in touch with being comfortable with the unknown and the mystery that presents itself when I do paint. Dutifully to the voice I heard inside, I decided to name this painting "Let Me Be for a While."
I'm hushing the dog on the chain. I'm running up stones on the edge of the bank. Rally the troops for another refrain. I sing this softly to myself. I sing this softly